Hey everyone, it's Scott from Heroic Studios Gaming coming at you with another video today. How's it going? It's been a long time, but I've revamped the Patreon, so I thought might as well start getting right into it. And I should have actually brought this to you a little bit earlier, but I was a little late. But let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about the Blade Runner RPG. Blade Runner RPG was made by Free Leagues. It's actually pretty good. I have the whole starter set and whatnot. GM screen kind of thing. So let's talk about it. So it's just going to jump in. The Blade Runner RPG, its description is that this is the Blade Runner role-playing game, a neo-noir wonderland that will take your breath away, one way or another. An evocative world of conflicts and contrasts that dares to ask the hard questions and investigate the power of empathy, the poison of fear, and the burden of being human during inhumane times. An iconic and unforgiving playground of endless possibilities that picks you up and slaps you in the face and tells you to wake up. Time to live or time to die. That's the description on the back. It's good. Pros and cons about this game. Just throw it out there before I start describing what it is and what you should expect when you're playing it. Pros, it's actually kind of a combination of both the book universe and like the movie universe. So it's got like the book aspects to it in various places, and then some of the lore is very clearly taken from the film. Some of the lore is actually taken from the comic books that were written about it. There's a little bit of like Black Lotus blent in, but it does feel like it's a hybridization of the semi-conflicting information that you'd find between the book or the movie or the written forms and the movie forms, because the book and the movie are vastly different. But they tried to sort of blend it, which might feel like it's cherry picking, but actually was really kind of good. It made it like playable and usable. There were some parts where I was reading the lore and I'm like, okay, this is from the movie. It's Tyrell Corp, which isn't really the corporation it's like the Rosen Corporation in the book. But then like later when it's talking about replicants and stuff, it's actually talking about the replicant models that were in the book. So I was like, all right, so they blended the two, pieces of information together. The con of this RPG is that it really only allows you to play humans or replicants that work for the LAPD. It doesn't give you the opportunity to be like a non-police officer, but that's kind of with the title. You're not really playing a cyberpunk game. You're not playing a cyberpunk game with replicants or anything. You're playing the Blade Runner RPG. So you really just kind of have to hunt and kill replicants, and that's the game. So it's a little bit saddening for those who were expecting a newer cyberpunk noir game. It's mostly kill the replicants game. But the 5 essential themes in the book are written expressly on page 19 and 20. They're science fiction action, character drama, corporate intrigue, moral conflict, and soul searching. Those are the 5 that it lists. But if you've ever read the Blade Runner books or really watched the movies, I think you could probably add noir, and noir is listed as one of the things on the back when it's talking about what this game is. And so that means you can add all the noir tropes like paranoia, loneliness, a haunted past, femme fatales, organized crime, corrupt politicians, things like that. So it's got a little bit more themes going on than just the 5 it lists expressly stated inside the book. But like, what is it? Well, the Blade Runner RPG system is the dice system very similar to Twilight 2004th edition, which I've talked about before. But essentially, it's got these base dice that you're going to roll. You're going to roll 2 of them, essentially, one for your attributes and one for your skills. One of them, they're going to go up and down, but one of them, skills, is going to probably specifically be the thing that you improve, and I'll explain that a little bit more later. But unlike Twilight 2000, however, there's no F rating for the skills. So it's got the same rating system, but there's no F rating for the skills, so you're gonna have 2 dice. The other thing that they did is they modified the system. So instead of having like modifiers, they sort of streamlined it. Instead of having modifiers where you like increase or decrease the die type, they just added advantage and disadvantage, where advantage would be having an additional die based on the lowest die in your base die set there, or disadvantage, which takes away the lowest die from the die set. So they kind of did that instead of doing the modifiers, and then you would, on advantage, you would just roll all 3 dice and then ignore the lowest roll, right? And then you get rid of that one, and then whatever the other ones were, that's your actual dice roll. And like with every Free League system, so if you are used to Free Leagues in general, you know that 6s are successes. So just like Everything else, well, at least one success, will get you what you need. If you have anything more than that, that's just additional. And in Twilight 2000, a 10 or above is also 2 successes. So you have the possibility of having 4 successes total on your dice pool roll, which is really unnecessary for most things, but is necessary for opposed rolls because you want to get more successes than the person you're opposing, right? So every success that's additional to the 1 adds cool new additional benefits. And in fact, in the Blade Runner RPG, 2 successes is considered a critical success, which is pretty crazy. But because in combat, in melee combat specifically, which I'll cover more on that, but in melee combat it's an opposed roll, so that makes sense. You can also push your rolls in this game, but pushing your rolls allows you to re-roll whatever dice you want. It really suggests that you don't want to re-roll anything that was a success because it could get risky and you could get no successes, but you can re-roll whatever dice that didn't get anything as long as they're not ones. That's the only caveat. And then there's some sort of thing that comes with some damage that comes along with that, but I'll explain that in a little bit. So that's it. So you have your attributes and you have your skills. The attributes are rated A through D and the skills are rated A through D, and you're essentially going to have a die that corresponds to that number. So A would be a D12, B would be a D10, C would be a D8, and D would be a D6. There's only 4 attributes. It's strength, agility, intelligence, and empathy, and there are 12 skills, 3 for each of those, and I'm not going to just list them all out because that would be boring, so I'll spare you all the time. But on average, you're probably going to have C's in most of your skills. I mean, you might have some D's, but then you'll probably have some B's or A's, right? And so that's how you'll have your dice pool sort of created. But that leaves wiggle room for character development, which will probably be more something you do in longer campaigns, obviously. But I mean, the game seems to be more designed toward one-shots and maybe 3-part episodes. Not really so much prolonged campaigns, but it does have a system for developing your character over prolonged campaigns. So, character creation is a little bit complicated. Not really complicated. It's just a little bit of a lengthy process you got to do. I think once you get the hang of it, it probably only takes 20, 30 minutes, which is fine. It's not a streamlined game, say, but it's not super crunchy. But the reason why your character creation takes a long time is because character drama, right, was number 2 in the themes. They want you to create a character that you want to play around with, that's going to have role-playing abilities. So you start off and you have to choose whether your character is a human or replicant. And that affects essentially every decision you make after that. So if you're a human, then you just follow things pretty streamlined. If you're a replicant, you do as well, but there's a little bit of additional things. Like replicants have additional health, but there's certain job ratings that they can't get, right? So you have to choose whether you're a human or a replicant. After that, you choose your archetype, and there's 7, but 2 are human only. So that's why you kind of have to decide, am I a replicant or human? 2 of them are human only. I'll cover that in a little bit. But the rest are open to everybody. So it doesn't really matter if you're a replicant. You can be a doxy as a human or a replicant, for example. And then you have to determine how long you've been on the force. So that's a choice that you really only can make if you're human. All replicant police officers, all replicant Blade Runners in this game are rookies because they've only been allowed to be Blade Runners for 1 year. So they're all rookies, and that sort of changes your options from there because the options for how long you've been on the force, they actually do determine how many adjustments to your attributes and skills and how much extra chinion you start off with and things like that and how many specialties you have. So you kind of have to choose. So you start off every attribute at then you start off every attribute at C, and then you're going to make improvements based on that year you've been on the force. And weirdly, the longer you've been on the force, the less you adjust your attributes because it's, I guess, you're older and you've gone through some stuff and you've taken injuries or things like that, I guess was the implication. But there's a balancing factor, and I'll cover that in a little bit. So you'd start at C and you make the modifications to your attributes based on that. So replicants are going to have higher attributes because they are rookies, and that's the only choice they have. After you do your attributes, then you're going to determine the derived stats, which are health and resolve. That's it. And so that's your how much damage you can take and how much stress you can take, which we'll cover in a little bit. But essentially, that's what you're going to do. So that's derived. You just do that and then move on. Then you go to skills, where everything starts at D. Everything starts at its lowest level, and you're going to make improvements based on the years in the force. So you're going to be, if you're more experienced, then you will have more skill benefits, so you'll have higher skills. versus the rookies that have lower skills, but they'll have higher attributes, right? So it kind of balances itself out. Then you choose a number of specialties for your skills, and that comes in based on your years in the force. If you're like an old timer, you're going to have more specialties because you've been around, you've seen stuff, you've done things, versus rookies that don't have any specialties. They're still too new. Then you have some interesting parts of character creation that I kind of liked, and I really liked going through. You have to create your character's key memory, which is a memory that they latch onto and like think of, and they can recall, and it does mechanical benefits for them in the game. And your character's key relationship, which is another thing that plays a factor in how the game plays out and sort of the role playing aspects. So you get to create those. There's like some guides, and it says roll from these things or develop it on your own. So you don't have to just choose like, oh, I have a photo. You can make it whatever you want, but it just gives you some guidelines on what might be good. Then you just pick up your starting gear, and you determine how many Chinian points you have, which is based on your archetype. And it's based on, and then you make modifications based on your years in the force. So if you're an older police officer, then you have a little bit more money than everyone else, essentially. Then you have to choose your signature item or develop it. And it should come up from either your key relationship or your key memory, like a wedding ring if you have your key relationship as your spouse, or if the picture. If you have a picture, then probably the picture of the memory that you have, right? And then it's just the fluffy stuff where you do the character's name and appearance, but you also have to determine the look of their home, because that's a key factor in kind of the movies and the book for for the characters and stuff. So the game has you do that. It's part of the development. You have to choose where they live and what it looks like. So the most interesting part about it is like. There's actually two. Like I said, the key memories and key relationships I thought was super fun. That was super cool to like work through. But the interesting thing I thought was the balancing act that they play, the sort of inverted idea with the characters' years on the force. The longer they've been on the force, the lower their attributes, but the more their skills. And also the specialties, right? So there's kind of a balance where you're like, okay, if I'm choosing to be an older cop, I'll have more skills, which I can develop later, but I'll have lower attributes. Versus if I'm a rookie, I'll have higher attributes, lower skills, but I can develop skills later. Attributes, interestingly, don't change. So once you reach that character creation endpoint, that's it. Those are your attributes. That's how they are. So it kind of benefits you to be a rookie because you'll have higher attributes, and then you can work on the skills with the character progression system. And I think that was the smart way to do it. So it gives you incentive to start as a rookie and actually build your character's experiences by playing in longer campaigns with your friends. So it was a nice character creation balance that I thought was pretty dang cool. I was like, yeah, that's pretty awesome. But all right, so those are the two things about character creation I liked. The archetypes are interesting as well because they're the source of your character's key skills and the key attributes. Now, weirdly, those aren't a thing that you get any kind of benefit from. Like, just because it's your key attribute doesn't mean you get like advantage on it. What it actually does is it tells you that you have to have a certain rating in this key attribute or in this skill. So kind of looking at the archetypes you want should be done before you do the stats, right? It makes sense. So if like you're going to be an analyst, well, then you're going to want they're the smart ones. So you're going to kind of want your key attribute to be intelligence, right? And so it needs to be at a C rating or a B rating or above so that your character isn't just that archetype and they do those things, but they actually do roll the dice and do a pretty good job of it. So I thought that was an interesting way to do the archetypes. It's like, this is your key skills. You want to have those at C. These are your key attribute. You want to have that at B. So that's what you do. There are 7, like I said before. There's 2 that are not open to replicants. There's 2 that are human only, and that's the city speaker and the skimmer. So the city speaker, and the reason for that makes sense. So the city speaker is someone who grew up on the streets, who's got connections. Maybe they're not so legal connections, but is basically in the trenches and like is part of what's going on. Whereas a skimmer is essentially an older cop who has kind of just gotten tired of the system. They're a good cop, but they do skim off the top. They get extra additional Chinian points because they take bribes and stuff. but they're still a good cop. But the idea is that it has to be a cop who's been in the force for a while and has gotten disillusioned with the streets. And so since replicants can't be anything more than rookies, they can't be a skimmer, right? So those are the two. The other ones are analyst, doxy, enforcer, fixer, and inspector. And analysts are the smart people who seem to have an easy life. Doxies are observant and ruthless. Enforcers are the kick open doors and shoot people. Fixers are basically politicians and have friends in high places. And inspectors are the quintessential Blade Runner from the books and movies. That's essentially what it is the inspector. So you can kind of choose what archetype you want, and it'll tell you your things. Character progression is actually done through two different methods, and I thought that was actually really interesting. You don't just have experience points. You have two different set of points. You have humanity points and promotion points. Promotion points are the thing that we would sort of think are what experience would be, except that they don't actually help you benefit any of your skills or anything. So promotion points are representation of your standing in the LAPD. You can gain them from doing jobs, doing the missions, the case files as they call them. And if they do something negative, like if the character does something negative, the force might take some away. So the promotion points can fluctuate depending on how the players are handling situations. If they're doing everything by the book, they get to keep their promotion points. If they do some really shady illegal stuff and they piss off the captain, they're going to lose some promotion points, right? But when you get the promotion points, eventually it sort of reflects that you've gotten some accommodations, that you've been doing your job, and so you can use it to get new specialties, request new or better gear, so you can improve your gear, or you can exchange your promotion points for Chinian points, basically indicating a bump in your pay, right? So you can have more Chinian. So that's how the promotion points work. Meanwhile, your humanity points are what you use. You gain them from doing things like interacting with your key relationships or your key memories during the gameplay, interacting with your signature item, and maybe you get them from doing something humane during your case file. But that's how you get those, and those you use to improve your skills. So there's two different methods for how you develop. So if you're interacting with the game world, your key memories, your key relationships, you get to gain your humanity points. And replicants also gain humanity points at certain times. Whenever they lose all of their promotional points, for example, whenever they lose the promotion points, or not lose them, but whenever maybe if it's lose, whenever it reaches 0. So if they spend them all on something, or if they lose them because they did something wrong, they have to do this sort of debrief thing, and then they gain some humanity points. So it's actually kind of a neat little system there for the replicants to also still be able to gain humanity despite the fact that they're not human. But they also still gain humanity by interacting with their key memories, which is an interesting thing for those of you that know how replicants work and the false memory business that they encounter. So let's get into more of the rules. Time measurement in this game is done through the sort of simplistic system that's kind of common for games these days. It's not unlike the stuff you find in Alien RPG or Twilight 2000 or basically any rules-like game. There's essentially two kinds of brackets of time. You've got rounds for combat, and this game uses shifts, which are 6 hours. The shifts in Alien RPG are 8 to 10 or something. In Twilight 2000, they're they're 8. And in this game, they're no, they're 6. And they did that for a reason. So they broke the time up into 4 shifts per day, right? That's what they did. So they did this segment where there are these different shifts, which makes it easy it takes a burden off of the game master. It's easy for them to determine how long things have happened. You say you're going to investigate somebody. It's okay, you're on a stakeout. How many shifts do you want to spend on the stakeout? Well, let's do 1 shift. Okay, and so then they mark it off on the case file. They've spent 1 shift, observing space, and then you can determine where the story goes from there. Do they see the person? Do they not? Is the person not come out? In the notes for the case file, it might say something like they don't come out until the second shift of being tailed or whatever. And so it sort of break down the time that way. Or you see him leave, and so everyone decides that they're going to go in the house and search for hidden stuff. Well, that's a shift you spent searching. You check that off. And after 3 shifts, your character needs to rest. If they don't rest, then they take some stress, which goes into the damage section, which I'm coming up on. But it sort of forces the players to take rest at a certain time. After 3 shifts, they need to take 1 shift, not doing the job. They got to do what's called downtime, and I'll cover that in a second because I friggin' love downtime. So we're gonna end on downtime. But that's it. That's how they break it down in time, which makes it really easy to sort of track. It makes it each day in the game 4 segments, which makes you easy to be like, okay, in the case file, person doesn't show up till day 2, which is, for the 5th segment and onward. So you can go like, or the 5th shift and onward. So you're like, okay, that's this 5. It's shift 5 now. Okay, cool. Now that person starts showing up, right? The combat rules in the game are similar to the stuff you find in Twilight 2000 or in Alien RPG, but slightly different in that there's only the 2 base dice, right? In Twilight 2000, you had all these modifiers for like distance and things, but they took that away. They streamlined it, so it's just the 2 dice, and that's basically it. But it still uses the same sort of extra additional successes, meaning extra damage or things like that, or rapid fire guns give you stress, but you roll, or you don't roll initiative. You draw initiative from a deck of cards, just like Alien RPG and Twilight 2000, where you want to draw the lowest number. The lowest number goes first, the highest number goes last. It's basically 1 through 10, so you can replace the cards with a D10 roll if you want. It's a decent alternative. It works exactly the same way. And you can exchange an initiative with some other PC or NPC in the combat that you want to, as long as you and they have not acted yet in the round. So you can be like, oh, I actually want to go after, and somebody's like, oh, I'm going first, but I don't want to go first. Or I want him to go first because he's the inspector and I know he's gonna kick ass and take names. So you can exchange it. Doesn't matter. The game masters can let that happen. But on your turn, you get to take 2 actions, but they're not 2 free actions. You're going to move is one of your actions. It's automatically determined. Moving is 1, and taking any kind of action is the other. So you get to do 2 things on your turn, and move is 1, and action is the other. Sort of did that D&D style, right? But you can do whatever you want. However, close combat actions have to be done within close range. This game uses zones, and so you have the zones of like close range, engaged range, near range, that kind of thing. So engaged range you have to be in to do close combat, but it's an opposed roll. So when I go to hit you, you're going to try to do something to hit me back or defend or whatever, and so we will do our thing at the same time, and then on my turn, then I will attack you, and you can do the same thing. So it moves the hand-to-hand combat along pretty quickly. It's opposed rolling, and basically you have to have 1 more success than the other person. If you guys meet, then nothing happened. But if you have 1 more, then you do damage to them, and damage is going to be covered in a second. In range combat, it's a lot simpler. In range combat, you just need a success. So you just roll. If you hit, you did it. Now, there may be some reason why you get a disadvantage or something. Maybe they're hiding behind cover, or maybe they're moving too quickly or something like that. But otherwise, it's not really, really complicated. It's just like, do I have advantage or disadvantage? Yes or whatever. I roll. I hit. Damage. So it's easy. But the damage system in this game has 2 types of damage, right? You have damage, which is from physical attacks and from pushing physical skills. And then you have stress, which comes from stressful situations or pushing mental stats. So if you, and getting 1, so there's a caveat. Well, you can push your rolls all you want, and it's fine as long as you don't get a 1. If you get a 1, you gain this damage or stress, depending on what it was. If it's strength or agility, you get damage. If it's intelligence or empathy, you get stress. And so you do those things. And so you rack up this damage and stress, and it gets to a point where you become broken. So when you're attacking, like I said before, the target will get hit because you succeeded. You will do the base damage of your weapon against them, and then add 1 for every additional success that you have. Or if you get like a cool critical thing, maybe something happens. But when their health reaches 0, then they become broken, and they're not unconscious and out of action. They're just kind of stuck, mumbling, not really able to do anything. And that's when you would roll from your weapons critical. You'd roll your weapons critical die. It's going to be die on there. It says critical is D8 or whatever, D4. Well, it's going to be D6, right, or something. And you roll that, and that will, on the critical effects table, will determine what happened to them. There might be an immediate death. That might be the thing. They might just die. But more than likely, it's going to end up with some winging, maiming, just some breather problems. But no one actually just straight dies in this game, which is an interesting thing. They might die. They might bleed for a while, and then they might die, and then they're dead. Stress comes from horrific situations or stressful situations like rapid fire your gun, or going like more than 3 shifts without taking any downtime. You gain some stress, or like pushing the die, like I said, and getting a 1. Stress, it can break a character as well. They can be broken from stress, and when they reach that 0, they get broken. But what they do then is they roll their empathy die, whatever that empathy stat rating die number is. They're going to roll that, and that'll determine what kind of critical stress effect they get. But it's only temporary. It lasts until they get some kind of mental health, or they survive a whole shift, and then it goes away, and they gain back the stress. They gain back the stress from the box, right? So we get to downtime. Downtime, you want to take if you've been in a fight. You want to do it because during downtime, you spend a whole shift not doing anything. You gain back health. You gain back 1 damage and 1 stress, right? You gain them back. You get to recover them. So you want to do that. You also want to do it because you don't want to go more than 3 shifts without resting. But it's not saying that you have to do certain things. It actually says during downtime, you do whatever you want as long as it's not work. Go to the bar, go to the club, go home, play the piano, whatever the hell it is you want to do. And you can do some stuff like sitting around. You can try to like work on some backstory things, interact with your signature item, interact with your key memory, interact with your key relationship. You just can't work anymore. You can't be out looking for a replicant. You have to take some downtime. But it's cool because there's also a whole table in the GM section that gives you ideas on cool events that could happen to the player during downtime, which is kind of neat because it's sort of role-playing esque type stuff. So overall review, because we're at that point, overall review of the game. This game is wonderful if you don't go into it thinking it's a cyberpunk game. If instead you're thinking of like the maudlin moods of the movies, or you're going to play a Blade Runner and you're not going to be a street punk, as long as you go into it with that, it's 2 thumbs. Absolutely 2 thumbs. Well done. Art is beautiful. Now, otherwise, it's a 1.5. I doubt that the Free Leagues people are ever going to put out a supplement where you can play J.R. Sebastian or something. Could be fun to do that, but they're not going to, I don't think. It's focused on being the LAPD Blade Runner, so that would be its weakness. The weakness is it's not a typical cyberpunk game, and you're not going to get, I think, any kind of supplement that lets you be just like a bartender, right? You're going to be an LAPD replicant killing Blade Runner. So, that's a 1.5 thumbs as far as like in the world of the cyberpunk genre goes. 1.5. However, for Blade Runner, 2 thumbs. Love the hell of it. Looking forward to doing it and playing it and running it for people. So, have a good day, everyone. Thanks for spending 27 minutes with me. Come 28 by the time I say goodbye. So, thank you very much. Go play some Blade Runner, and I hope that you have good gaming.